Hello, everyone. I'm Small Town Voice. Today, this is my very first video to start my English channel, Small Town Voice. I already have a Chinese channel called 小镇小民, and the purpose of that is to let people in China and other Chinese-speaking people know more about the United States and the West. And so in the process, I also noticed that people in the West, in the United States, need to know more about China. So with that, I wanted to start the English channel, Small Town Voice. The very first episode, today's episode, I'm very fortunate to get to interview Mr. Garland Nixon. Mr. Garland Nixon is a longtime program host. He currently is the radio host for Pacific Radio in Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles. He also has his show on Radio Sputnik. Before that, he was a longtime host on Fox News, and he was also a police officer for many years. Needless to say, he has a lot of experience as an investigator and also program host. So I was very fortunate to be able to talk to him. Now, the reason I invited him to my program to interview him is because of this tweet. So on his tweet, February 15th, here is what he said. Breaking news, White House insiders leak that when asked if there could be any greater disaster than the neocon Ukraine project, President Biden responded, wait until you see our plan for the destruction of Taiwan. Now that tweet was translated by some people into Chinese, and it was posted on some Chinese social media. And as you can imagine, it was taken seriously, and huge discussions broke out around that, and created big interest in China, both in mainland and in Taiwan. And so when I saw that, I just a little bit curious what was the story behind it. And so that's why I contacted Mr. Garland Nixon, and he's very gracious and agreed to the interview with me. Now, even before the interview, we exchanged emails. He explained to me that the tweet is a satire. Now, the reason why people do not see it's a satire directly is, first of all, it's lost in the translation. In the Chinese translation, it's very hard to see. It's funny. It's a joke. It's very hard to see that. Plus, also, people do not see the context. It's a classical example of lost in the translation. Because when I went to his Twitter account and checked, and then there's some previous tweets, and when I see all that, it's very clear to me it is a satire. It's a joke. But if you only look at the translation of this particular tweet, it's very hard to see that. And the other reason is that this kind of a talk is not new. The US government seriously considered to destroy TSMC not that long ago. And in the end, the TSMC was forced to invest in Arizona, and so moved parts of its manufacturing capacity into the United States. And there were some other talks about it, which is why people actually do believe it, including me. So with all that, I just wanted people to see my interview with Mr. Garland Nixon, and he will have his take on the whole thing. And we're talking not only about his tweet, but also the media, talked about what is the rules-based order, etc. I find the conversation most fascinating and very insightful, and I hope you enjoy it too. And I will put more content into my channel from now on so that I want people to know more about China. China is not a very easy country to understand. And I do think understanding between people are extremely important. Thank you. Just to give you a little bit background of what happened, you know, your tweet, maybe you don't see a lot of reaction on your Twitter account by itself, you know, the tweet that you're talking about, but there's a huge, huge discussion about your tweet in China. I want to share my screen with you to see, just to give you some idea what is going on. This is the first clip, just so you see. Okay.
All right.
So I translated that. Okay.
拜登啊，被爆料出来说毁灭台湾计划，你要拿台湾，我先把台湾毁了。虽然今天各方都在否认，说没有这个毁台计划，但是之前你们的兵推、你们的智库专家，就有很多人讲的就是这个嘛。你为了不要让你的战略对手、竞争对手中国大陆拿到台湾，你居然说炸毁台积电，你居然说在台湾搞焦土，你搞焦土烤了台湾，那请问台湾上面的人呢，不是就陷入那个水深火热里了吗？
See, Okay. This is one of the many clips. I just took one. Now, the quality is not very good, but what this person is saying is basically, okay, we heard that the Biden administration, you have a plan. You see, they don't even question that the authenticity of this. They just believe there is a plan to destroy Taiwan. And then what this person is saying, well, we believe it because you talked about destroy TSMC, the Taiwanese chip company. You talk about that before, and you also talk about the scorched earth, which they talk about, basically destroy the whole Taiwan into, I don't know, a Stone Age or something like that. They talked about that. They openly talked about destroy TSMC. That is no news. That's the reason people believe it. So I just want you to explain a little bit what you're thinking of it. And now I know that because in your email, you told me that it's a satire. And then I went back to look at your Twitter. And now I understand that you are, because you have a previous tweet also was kind of funny that, if I read everything, then I can see it's a satire. It started with some people on Twitter actually translated your tweet into Chinese. And in the translation, it's a classical example of lost in the translation. If I read only the Chinese translation, there is nothing funny about it. There is no satire tone in there at all. Plus, if I don't look at your previous tweet about the Taiwan, because once I see that, I know it's a joke, it's satire. But if you only translate that particular tweet and then you only read the Chinese, it's very hard to see the funny part of it. Can you just give us a little bit of, the background of what were you thinking, when you were putting it there?
Certainly. So what I do is I use satire to come as close as I can to reality and to use, sarcasm and satire to demonstrate that the absurdity of a reality in this instance. And so usually I take something that people are well aware of that is extremely obvious and I turn it into a satirical comment. And I find that very often, and it's unintentional to me, but very often people look at my satirical comments and they say, that's so close to reality that I almost believe it, right? And I'll make these kind of comments for this reason, because these things are obvious. Yeah. Let's be frank about this. The Biden administration has come right up to the Russian border, overthrown the government of a country and set this country up for a military confrontation between two nuclear superpowers, and this country is being turned to rubble. Yeah, they are doing the exact same thing with Taiwan. Yeah. So the idea that Joe Biden doesn't know that any conflict between two nuclear superpowers with Taiwan as ground zero will turn Taiwan to rubble is preposterous. Clearly, he knows that. Add this to the fact that Joe Biden often makes, shall we say, statements that his handlers would prefer that he doesn't make. Some people call them gaffes, but I don't call them gaffes because more often than not, they're true, they're reality, and the internal story, the cover story that they use would be exposed by his comments. So he'll make a comment, and then later on, his handlers will say, oh, no, he didn't really mean that. Everybody knows he meant it. So to me, it's so obvious. That's like if I made a satirical tweet that said something about, if I jump into the ocean, I'll get wet. Well, it could be satirical, true, but no reasonable person would say, well, if he jumps in the water, he's not certainly going to get wet. In the same way, to set up a tiny island between two nuclear superpowers in the historical context, and I mean historical context in the last few hours history. Well, how about this? Not even a historical context, in the context of the present conflict in Ukraine. Yeah. Anyone looks at Ukraine and looks at Taiwan, and I think to myself, are the people in Taiwan suicidal? It is the equivalent of Jonestown, which was a cult in the United States, and they moved to Guyana, and they opened a little cult, and they all lived in the jungle, and whatever weird religion they had, and ultimately they all drank this Kool-Aid that was poisoned, committed suicide, and killed themselves. That's what Taiwan is clearly doing. They're saying, yes, we see what you did to Ukraine. Do the exact same thing to us, and it's going to turn out okay for us. So that's the point I was making there with satire, but it's so blatantly, obviously close to reality that while Joe Biden wouldn't come out and say it like that, he doesn't have to.
No, I agree. I do think they have a plan for Taiwan. It is going to be devastation.
Yes.
I mean, that's, I actually think what you're saying, you just spill out the things that everybody believes. That is going on. That is what's going on. Here's another clip. I also want to see your comments on that. That is, let's see. Okay, this one.
I have one other thing. And Tsai Ing-wen is so clearly exactly the same as Zelensky.
Yeah.
She's exactly the same person. You've got an outside entity saying, take your tiny little island and heave it between these two elephants for a fight. And she's saying, yes, send us a few more weapons so that we can defend ourselves from the Chinese military. That's preposterous. So, I mean, I cannot grasp how the people of Taiwan can walk around and say, yes, we better save money for our old age. You're not going to have an old age if these people in power in Taiwan stay in power.
Yeah. So here's Lindsey Graham. Let's see what he says. Okay.
Is this an area where you actually agree with Speaker Pelosi?
Yeah, she should have gone. I'm glad she went. If she hadn't gone, what would that have sent signal to the Iranians and the Russians? I want to build on what Dick just said. One thing affects the other. Why does anybody care about Taiwan? 90% of the high-end chips for refrigerators, the F-35, and cars are made in Taiwan. How would you like the Chinese Communist Party to own that whole market? We need supply chain break from China. So Taiwan's important to us economically. The last guy that tried to rewrite the map of Europe by force was Adolf Hitler. It threw us into a major war. This is a land war in Europe in 2022, and the Ukrainians can win this thing with our support. So here's what I want China to know. Putin made a big miscalculation. Almost 6 months into this war, Ukraine is bloodied but still standing unbowed. NATO is bigger, not smaller. The International Criminal Court is coming after Putin and his cronies, and we're going to strangle the Russian economy as long as they're the largest state sponsor of terrorism. So if you want to receive what Putin did, try to go into Taiwan. They're going to fight to the last man in Taiwan.
You hear him saying that?
Of course.
They're going to fight the last man in Taiwan. I mean, he spelled it out.
Yes. Yes. And here, keeping in mind the other thing about Taiwan, and they have to think about this. Taiwan's economy is inextricably linked to China's economy. The U.S. is saying we're going to destroy China's economy. What do the Taiwanese think will happen to them? Well, to be quite frank, nothing will happen to them because they won't be alive to find out. So to me, to look at this and see the people that one person in Taiwan could say, you know, I think it's a really good idea if we sit here between the PLA and the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy and see how this works out for us is, as I said, effectively the government of Taiwan is a suicidal cult that's throwing their country to there's no possibility of survival. To absolute certain death for Taiwanese people. I cannot, for the life of me, fathom how anyone in Taiwan could look at this and think that they will come out of this with anything other than basically a moonscape. They look around, take pictures of what Taiwan used to be, and maybe bury it in a time capsule so people in the future will know what it used to be, because you nor your children nor your grandchildren will be around to see it. It's just suicide.
Yeah, I mean, they, like you said, sometimes they will spill out the truth, right? Lindsey Graham was talking about the Ukraine, but then in the middle, he's throw it in, Taiwan, and that is the one sentence came out, and that's when he was telling the truth. Lots of times they have scripts, right? But it is when they're off scripts that they are telling the truth. So clearly in their mind, Taiwan is just, they want the Taiwan to fight until the last Taiwanese. And, it's things like that add together that's why you tweet. So many people believe.
Well, let me add this. And my understanding is the government of Taiwan was highly upset by that tweet, of all things. And here's my first thought. You are literally making your island a battle zone between two nuclear superpowers, and you're offended by a tweet? Trust me when I tell you this, the least of your problems are going to be on Twitter. The leaders of the U.S. empire are literally saying, we are going to throw that island into, a battle zone. They're going to fight to the last Taiwanese. That means that there isn't going to be anybody left. And the government is offended by a tweet. They literally define the word quisling. They are a traitorous government. It's worse than a traitor, because a traitorous government, at least a traitor generally gets paid. He gets some silver, he gets some money, or she gets something. They're going to get killed exactly the same as the people that they are ostensibly representing. The other thing is this: the people of Taiwan have to ask themselves, who does our government represent? It's clearly that government has no representation for them. They're using, add this, they're the kind of foundation worldwide. When people think of Taiwan, the foundation of their economy is their chip manufacturing, TSMC, right? This giant people are like Taiwan, computer chips. Those two things go together like a tree and a leaf. Those two things go together. The U.S. has already tried to snatch part of that and bring it to Arizona and rebuild it here. So the U.S. clearly, it's obvious the plan. Well, we're going to need chips. And we know Taiwan's going to be blown flat to smithereens. So there's not going to be able to get any chips from Taiwan, because there'll be no Taiwan left to make chips. So therefore, we have to bring the company here. So at least there'll be a company somewhere in the world to build chips. And the Taiwanese are sitting there. Their principal company has already been stolen. And now they're set up to be cast aside as skeletons and bodies to be thought about at a future. Maybe someone will dig up skeletons at a few. And it may sound like I'm being over the top, but in reality, I'm not being over the top. Lindsey Graham is saying what I'm saying. There is no daylight between what I'm saying and what Lindsey Graham is saying. Because when he says fight to the last Taiwan citizen, he simply means we'll make sure they're all dead. The last kind of implies that they're all dead, doesn't it?
Exactly. I mean, he meant it. He really wasn't like a joking or anything. He meant it. That's the scary part. I mean, these people, you use the word, psychopaths. They are psychopaths. They really are. And this morning, I was just watching, Kim Iverson was interviewing a former colonel, which also was a former Virginia senator, Black.
Yes.
Black. And he was saying the same thing. He said, if we do have a World War III, people need to know that probably 60% of Americans will be dead. And Europe will do not much better. What he said, actually, places who might survive it, maybe Africa will survive it, maybe part of Asia, maybe part of South America, but the West are the ones that will get destroyed. But people don't seem, but then he said, but people within the Beltway, there are people who don't seem to mind that much. They don't seem to care. That's probably what's going to happen if we have a World War III, with the two nuclear powers start a real war. But the people who are making decisions, some of them don't seem to care about that.
I would put it differently. And I was a police officer, actually a police official in the state of Maryland. And I will tell you a little story about these people are psychopaths, but how psychopaths think. I understand them quite well. I've arrested one or two of them. And a psychopath thinks like this: oh, there's something in front of me and I want it and I can get it. I'll get it. They don't think about the future. Quick story that'll tell you about how these neocons think. There were two people in a car. They were cousins. One of them cashed his check for $500 and put it in the glove compartment. He goes into the store to get a pack of cigarettes. He comes out, nobody in the car but his cousin. The $500 went missing. It's obvious who took it. The police arrive. I may have been one of them. And say to the cousin, he says to the cousin, look, just give me my $500 back and we can go on about our business. His cousin, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have it. It's clear. There's nobody else. Did somebody else get in the car? No. Give me my $500 back. No, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have it. So the police officers say, well, if we search you and find that $500, we're going to arrest you. If you got the $500, why don't you give it back? Your cousin does not want anything to happen to you. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have it. The police officers then search him and it's in his sock. Now, it was clear to me that that guy was at minimum a sociopath.
Yeah.
A sociopath or a psychopath. Why? Because he's sitting there and he says, there's $500 in front of me. I want that $500. I can get the $500. There was no thought about the repercussions, about the future, anything, just it's in front of me and I want it. These psychopaths, we think about, well, if this happens, that could happen in the future and we could be killed by it. That's not the way a psychopath thinks. A psychopath thinks, I don't like the Russians and the Chinese, and I'm going to make them do this. They don't really process the long-term effects of the. It's when it happens, they'll deal with it. So he's sitting there saying, no, I don't know what you're talking about. At that point, within seconds, his error was going to catch up with him because as a person who studies the philosophy of Zen, in a way, sociopaths or psychopaths are the ultimate practitioners of Zen, because they are actually in the present and they don't think about the future at all in a twisted kind of way. So the Bidens and the Newlands aren't thinking about the repercussions. In a way, to talk about them with any future reference to their actions is not to wholly understand how they think. They don't get to the future. They want it. They can think they can get it. They're going to try to get it. And then when the future catches up with them, they just go, oh, well, I guess I'll deal with that now. And in a nuclear holocaust, you ain't dealing with that now. Nobody is. And sadly, the leaders of Taiwan are clearly sociopaths. They are drunk with power and they're saying, look at us. Look what we can do. They're not thinking, oh, well, this ain't going to work out well for us. They have a clear reference point in Ukraine. It could not be clearer. In fact, Lindsey Graham and the neocons are literally saying to them, sorry about that, are literally saying to them, we're going to kill all of you. This was Lindsey Graham saying, hey, guys, thanks for working with us. We're going to kill every one of you. And they're saying, yeah, the Chinese are our enemies. These are our friends.